Welcome to the Futurisity Podcast. Third episode is already here. Today we have a wonderful human being on a visit, Tobias Schuett, founder and CEO of DZ4, straight from Hamburg, Germany, who will be talking about renewable energy, big data, smart grids, and Climate Action Program 2030. I appreciate you found some time to come to the Futurisity Podcast, Tobias. And beforehand, my huge congratulations for the Series D investment round. I guess it's a big step for DZ4 and in general for the green future growth.
Thank you, Vlad. It's a big pleasure to be on this podcast, to work together with you again. We share a past, and so I'm very happy and wish you all the best and all the success with your effort and sharing interesting stuff for your followers. So congratulations and my big support. I wish you well on that.
Would you briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Tobias, as you rightly said. I'm 44 years of age. I'm an economical engineer by education. Basically, since 2001, I've worked in the solar PV industry with one short little interruption. And at the beginning of my career, that solar PV back in the early 2000s was something very fancy that not many people believed in. It was still very new, and it was more for nerds and really purely green motivated people who didn't have the best reputation at that time. So it's glad to see the journey 20 years later. This is becoming more and more mainstream. We have all the power, all the action around climate activities, although it still needs to be more. But the mindset has changed. And personally, I've worked in different positions in different areas around the world, but I've specialized in structured finance or in general in financing of renewable energy business cases, or I should say solar PV business cases. I've also lived in California when the solar as a service companies emerged. At that time, it was just that was 2005, 6, 7, around that time. That's when I lived in California in 2008. Before that, I worked there for quite a while. I've also worked for a bank. And in 2011, I have decided to quit my job and start a new company focused on solar PV for German house owners in a full service peace of mind business model, in the meaning that we wanted to find a solution for consumers that wanted green energy, that wanted clean energy, cheap energy, reliable energy, wanted to use solar PV from their own rooftop, like planting tomatoes and eating them in the afternoon, doing the same with solar PV, but making it easy for them so that the customers don't have to hassle with the technical aspects, the financing. So what we did, we put all of solar PV and battery as a service. So customers only sign an agreement with us where they pay a monthly fee over the lifetime or a period of 25 years. And DZ4 takes care of all the rest, like system design, installation, maintenance, financing, all of that, insurance, all of that is included in that price. And I want to say this is something that we as DZ4 developed as a business model. We did the first system in 2012. That system is still going, very successful. And we were the creator or pioneers of this business model. Right now, this is the fastest growing segment in this German solar PV retail market. So the solar as a service has become a standard product in the market. And actually, I'm me, I'm not the person that likes to say I'm proud of something, but I'm really happy that we have established a solution for many house owners in Germany where they get an easy access to solar PV and battery system to self-supply with green energy, and where they don't have to take care of all the problems that you're faced with when wanting to build or operate a solar PV system.
Thank you for a comprehensive introduction, Tobias. As a former employee of DZ4, when I'm thinking about your startup back in the days, how was this decision made? What were your initial thoughts about starting your own company and quit a well-paid job? I mean, 9 out of 10 startups fail. And it also backed up by the data from Striber, who basically scraped the Crunchbase website and figured out that only 11 from 100 startups succeed. The rest dies, basically. At the very beginning, what was the likelihood that the company will die?
Well, that's also a very good Good question. I think I want to emphasize I would have never dreamed how exciting at times, how difficult such a journey is as a founder, and how the role changes from like real being very creative more into a management role. We have more
Mm-hmm.
than 100 employees by now, and so really growth. But at the beginning, it was two or three different things that motivated me to do that. I had a good corporate job and I had a good corporate career. I'm leaving all that behind. Some of my friends and family members, they scratched their head and said, "Look, what are you doing there? Why do you do this?" And so I was making good money, and it was all about insecurity. I think there's different elements. One is purpose. I mean, I was making good personal money, and I was making a lot of money for my employer.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, what for? With DC4, I had the chance to create something, to promote a solution that at that point, I've worked in the industry for 10 years. I know how good solar PV was in terms of eco balance. And really, to me, it's the key element of making, stopping climate change in terms of supply of electricity. Solar PV costs go down
Mm-hmm.
further and further. And I was simply, first of all, convinced from the purpose aspect, promoting solar PV and making it even in Germany, where we don't have that much sunshine, still
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. And now we see the result of it. It's getting promoted more and more. It was about self-determination. Working in big corporates is you're a manager. At the end of the day, the decisions that you make aren't so big, and I wanted to take more responsibility, more
Okay.
risk, more responsibility, more decision power,
Mm-hmm.
purpose, and I was really convinced that this business model that we have created, or that I, kind of done business plans 1.5 years prior to that, I was simply very, very convinced that the idea that I had would be successful. And I believe 10 years ago that this would be the new standard for
Okay.
solar PV in the retail market in Germany. It's still not the standard, but it's getting there. This maybe sounds odd or arrogant, but I've worked in the industry for 10 years. I've seen a similar approach in the United States being very successful. And the overall market drivers that determine the business model to me were obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Rising cost of electricity, rising cost of carbon, and declining cost of solar PV systems. It simply made so much sense, and we simply were very, very early. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason I sold it to my wife was, at that time I didn't have kids. The way I sold it to my wife was, look, I've made some money, I've got some reserves, give me 9 months. We live from our savings. And if we don't find a funding round, if it doesn't work,
Mm-hmm.
then I'll simply find a new job in a corporate. I could find a new job. So I had good expertise.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the budget of, now I'm investing into my competencies and resources. I'm trying to establish something, create something, a new business model around solar PV.
Mm-hmm.
I was convinced it worked. And so it did. We did the first funding round. And we did just in time. I was close to writing, application letters again, but then we found our first investor. I don't know how many followed, and that was not the safe haven that you described. It was always about buying time. First funding round means you're funded for the next, I don't know, at that time it was around 9 or 12 months. Next funding round. So we were never safe. And I wouldn't even today say you're never safe as an entrepreneur. You always need to see where the market is developing. You need to have a good product. You need to have high customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
So it's the challenge is always the same. You need to have a good product that convinces people. At the beginning, it's more about investors. Now it's more about customers. So the challenge is still on. And how long I can fight this challenge, I'm in it for the next, I don't know, for this episode where we're again building the next step in our company, investing in certain activities. I'm fully committed to it. Yeah, at the beginning it was, again, purpose, doing something good, have more authority, making your own decisions, if it's a mistake, then do it and live through it. But at least I can say it was my decision. Yeah, pushing, creating something.
I'm really curious about, if we take your just simple normal day, you wake up every day in the morning. What drives you? What makes you wake up?
Well, I'm a person that highly values relationships and people, and that is something that really keeps me motivated, keeps me getting up in the morning, keeps me motivated to work in the company, because in our company, I believe we have a super highly motivated team where we have met not where we have more than average motivation, ambition, and fight for the cause. And part of motivation is not disappointing those cool people like you still are, but when you were at DZ4, your ambition, your motivation, your keeping in there, pushing hard, and trying to do something good. I like to lead by example, and like to lead by being there and helping find
Yeah.
solutions. I think that would apply to me. It's a lot about relationships, and maybe you can also translate that into our business model. We talk about commitments over 25 years that we give our customers, our
Yeah,
systems
exactly.
for 25 years. And that has a lot to do that one of a key values in me, in myself, is relationship and sustainability and trust. And I think maybe you can see some of those traits in our business model and in the product that we're offering. That comes from me, and I cannot fake it. That's just in me.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say. That the whole business model of Digit4 is based on these long-term relationships with the customers and with the final users of the PV systems. So I guess you've done a good job in translating your natural human being and your inside world into this company. 100%.
Cool.
So for over a year, we've had a huge international chip shortage challenge, and it can be still felt right now, right? So silicon, for all the people who are listening to this podcast, the main component in all photovoltaic cells and wafers, and the cost of raw materials rises steadily. This affects explicitly the prices for converters and inverters, both crucial components in photovoltaic systems. And some photovoltaic modules became even 25 to 30% more expensive in the last year. So, how chip shortage and surging silicon prices affected the Digit4 business, plus lockdown as well? Maybe you can describe the situation.
You're you're absolutely correct. Those two factors have really impacted DZ4. One being the Corona crisis, and the other supply chain disruption, which is also affected by the Corona crisis. But let's start with the supply chain interruption. At the end of the day, we have seen um, very rather small impact in terms of shortages of different components. Like we, as you said, we're not a manufacturer, but we buy solar PV systems that are being, or through our installer network, we create these. And it's the obligation of our installers to secure the supply. So only indirectly we feel that by installers telling us that it takes longer to build a solar system because they cannot get the component that they offered us. At the end of the day, we were able to mitigate that largely because we do not work with one specific component, like module needs to come from that supplier or the inverter needs to come from that supplier, but we have a pool of different suppliers for each equipment part that we can use. So if there's a shortage of one supplier, we were always, and most times, be able to use a different product of the same quality so that we didn't have that much of a problem. In individual cases, we did have it. And overall, generally, we had longer installation times or waiting periods. I think that was okay. The other effect, generally, the Corona crisis on mindset. I think we experienced what others also experienced, at least in Germany, which is that people did a lot of home improvement and focused on things around the house. So basically, when the Corona crisis started in
March 2020.
that's a long time ago. March 2020, we had a real hard dip. Customers didn't want to do anything, but that lasted about 2 weeks. After that, it was more like, we have a regional product, we have a sustainable product, we have a good product. It was something that people, at the end of the day, I wouldn't say it pushed, but overall, the solar PV market in Germany has been growing strongly in 2020 and 2021. So we don't see a Corona effect there, really, on the demand side.
Okay. For me, there are simple economical laws, and I'm really glad that Digit4 has that kind of diversified network of all the suppliers for photovoltaic modules. That's one of the crucial components in this supply chain interruption times, right? And if the material prices grow and the net profit margin declines, there are two different options how it can be handled. So basically, either you adapt the technologies or you adapt your business model. And have you ever thought about adapting Digit4 business model in terms of this supply chain shortage?
It's good that you keep asking on that end. So in terms of short-term supply situation, I think I answered that. What we see now is really we're at the end of such a wave. So what we now see is really prices going up at the system level. That is being passed through, not in the dimension that you mentioned, where certain components were up 25, 50% even.
Yeah.
That's not the effect that we see, but because that's only individual components
Yeah, exactly.
in an overall system. So you try to find efficiency at other levels to compensate for one component becoming more costly. So we see a very, very moderate effect in our sourcing of overall systems. Have we looked at supply chain optimization? This is always a very at first sight, it might make sense to, let's say, to push volume onto one supplier. As you also insinuated, or as I explained, we use pools. We have different suppliers for the main components, modules, converters, and storage systems. That means if we went exclusive for one component, of course, we would have all the volume on one product and could probably strike a better deal and get costs down on that component. However, the side effects to that are we have a very complex business model where cost of financing plays a big role. And so if you're reliant on one supplier, it really has the effect if that supplier is affected by supply chain interruption or price increases, we're 100% affected by that. We really are running into issue. It's optimizing like cost, face value, and risk associated with that because of the dependency. So then you're talking about two or three. You could do that, of course. Right now, we're not doing that.
Okay.
More like 5 suppliers for each component. It's a little bit different on the storage system side. There, we do go the route of a certain preferred supplier, but the side effect that you also have that we secure financing for our asset with specialized banks and institutional infrastructure investors. And what we sell to them is a diversified portfolio. We also emphasize fully diversified in the sense, if you compare it to we use financing structures very, very similar to large-scale solar PV systems, offshore wind parks. But here the problem with these is you only have one interconnection point. If that interconnection point gets disrupted, you lose all your revenues and all that kind of stuff. And so we take that system of big financing, but say it's fully diversified, that makes it very reliable, stable, and resilient. So we have thousands of customers. If one defaults, well, it doesn't really affect it's not good, but if you talk about thousands, one falling apart is not so important. We have different suppliers, different technologies, different regions, all of that fully diversified. And that helps us in reducing the cost of financing because essentially it's technology distribution and technology mitigation. If we only had one supplier, the investors would say, now we need to review our position because we're reliant that this product is really good, that the warranties, if there is a serial issue and we need to replace them, it's a lot of work, it costs a lot of money. From the investment standpoint, it's more attractive to have a diversified portfolio than a single component risk. With sharing that complexity in our business model, yes, we could reduce the cost, the sourcing cost of one component, but it would have impact probably on the cost of financing, and it would increase our dependency and risk on that supplier. At the same time, we're of course looking to mitigate, price increases on components.
Speaking about renewable energies and in general energy market, the power generation from renewable energy resources is highly volatile, and the amount of decentralized energy resources, such as wind, solar, water, whatever, as well as flexible consumers, grow rapidly. For me, the distribution of the energy now goes based not only top-bottom approach as conventional one-way grid systems, but now in both directions, where you can produce electricity, you can buy electricity, you consume electricity, stuff like that. On this part, information and communication technology will play the central role in the energy systems. From my personal perspective, I strongly believe that it will be the next big step in the renewable energy sector. And it's a crucial element of every decentralized system to provide the stable data exchange for energy supply and demand, and namely smart grids. For me, it's kind of unavoidable element in the nearest, or let's say closest future. What do you think about smart grids? Can they replace conventional one-way energy grids? If yes, what are the conditions?
I need to say that I'm not a real expert on the issue of smart grids, but
Yeah, it's just I'm just asking for your vision of the future of energy market and on this particular question about grids.
what I would definitely confirm is that smart grids and digitalization of the energy grids will be a super game changer, and it is required in order for the energy transition, as we define in Germany, to be successful in Germany, in Europe, and globally. Because the way I see it is, in the past, power management, I mean, that was just, it was the best system that we had in the past, but now we have new technology. But how did we do it in the past? We built capacity, nuclear, coal, and we had wind and solar coming in, but really it was about big centralized power plants. And kind of the demand was something that wasn't projected and wasn't measured. Households, there was no forecast of the demand of those households. It was simply average. So maybe you had a demand forecast for high consumers like industrial sites and all that kind of stuff, but all the houses they were dumb. There were simply assumptions taken. How much energy do they use at what point in time? And then the real management of the power of the grid was, I mean, as we all know, in the energy grid, you need to have demand and supply need to be leveled. So what you did is you simply measured certain KPIs in the grid, and then you decided, okay, I mean, I don't know the demand side. I don't know, the grid currently isn't stable. We need more power or less power. And then we managed gas-fired power plants, because nuclear takes long to cool down and to rise, or coal also. So you kind of had your base load. That was like, okay, we know this is the minimum amount of power that we need 24 hours, 7 days a week. That's your base load, coal and nuclear. And then you've got your new quicker responding, water, downward water, gas, to mitigate based on data that you get from the grid. Oh, the grid is not unstable. We need more power. We need less power. But it was all about minimum capacity that was needed in order to have supply at each point in the time. So let's say there was only 20 to 30% excess capacity available in the market, could be drawn upon in order to keep the grid leveled. Yeah. What is happening with renewable energy? In renewable energy, solar and wind, the incremental cost or the operating cost of those units is basically none. You don't have fuel costs. It costs you a lot of money to produce an extra megawatt hour of coal-fired power, because you need to pay the coal, you need to pay CO2, but the extra megawatt hour of solar and wind doesn't cost you anything. You just need to know
nothing.
Wind shine, does the wind blow or the sun shine? Where you had a system where you had low capex in the conventional world with high operating costs, it now gets turned upwards down, where you've got high investment cost for the solar, PV, and wind, and very low operating costs. The effect of it will be that we do not have a minimum max capacity, but we will have super much max capacity. We will have gigawatts of capacity that we don't use because the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. But it doesn't matter, because the incremental cost is insignificant anyway. And in order to work the system now, through digitalization and through the smart grids, we have a super huge opportunity, because we can much better forecast demand, because we can now, through smart meters, actually measure demand, those small units. That was junk. It was never looked at in the past. And with that data, we could much better see if we use that wind turbine or if we just, let it blow, don't grid connect it, don't use it because, there's enough energy in the grid at this point. But in order for that to happen, we really need to have the ability of big data, process all that data. Actually, the technology, I would say, is there right now to do virtual power plants, to do demand forecast at every consumption site in Germany. The technology is there, but currently it's not being implemented for different reasons. And one of the reasons could also be if we turn down the conventional old system, that's difficult.
Of course.
But my new world is we don't have 20% or 30% additional capacity above the maximum demand that we would have, but we will have 200, 300, 400% extra capacity that we would not need sometime, but sometimes we use it. But that's just the renewable energy because we don't have operating costs exaggerated. Does that make sense and answer your question?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for me, for example, to balance the supply and demand and the basic technology is already here. But if we are talking about smart grids, in my eyes, there are a couple of things that should be done, Tobias. In the first line, of course, it's difficult to shut down the nuclear power plant and switch from this hierarchical top to bottom approach. But the first thing, I guess, is the financial support of the transition to smart grids. Also, I'm a strong believer, strong governmental participation should be included. Social resonance, people should speak about it as people speak about renewable energies right now, about electric vehicles, about climate crisis and stuff like that. Last but not least, we need some tough engineering breakthroughs in IT security, because that's also a big point for many people, especially here in Germany. If we go back, for example, to Belarus, it's not that big deal, and it's not really, it doesn't concern a lot of people at a specific point of time. But specifically in Germany, it's a big problem with the data security, how all this data can be processed, how can I be sure that IT infrastructure, governance, everything is secured and encrypted and stuff like that.
I mean, I think the data protection issue is very specific to the German market. I mean, you live in Germany. We've also seen that in the Corona crisis, where at times you really wonder what is a higher value. Is it your data protection or is it health? I guess when I want to comment on that is, to me, the energy transition is directly connected to distributed generation.
Yes.
And really like the small and medium scale solar PV systems, rooftop solar, every roof needs a solar system.
Exactly.
Every commercial building needs it. But I understand that there is also different views on that. And if we're talking governmental support or what we see in Europe right now with the decision, I don't know, I haven't seen the news today, but at least there was a discussion to declare nuclear and modern gas as clean energies.
Really?
And yeah, that is the discussion that is going on, which would help making nuclear power being an investment that would be considered like a green investment. And the logic behind it is it simply doesn't cause CO2 or carbon into the atmosphere and gas only if it replaces coal. What I'm challenging here is the energy transition, how I envision it and how I understand it is about distributed generation.
Yes.
Not top down, but bottom up and smart, like you described. And doing nuclear, fitting it in there, and doing gas is just a way of supporting the existing hierarchical system top down and doesn't help the energy transition. It only helps on the CO2 side, but that is only one angle of the energy transition. Other is the reliability, the bottom up. So that's simply something where we see, of course, many interests coming together and everyone having a stake. But I don't know about the decision that happened today, but that's what's behind. It's about maintaining and keeping the system as it is.
I didn't hear about it. It's crazy. I'll have a look after the conversation, what's going on. It's also about infrastructure on the infrastructure level. As you've mentioned, it just doesn't fit the nuclear power plants, gas, it doesn't fit in this system. And I'm strongly convinced it should be distributed and the future is decentralized.
And maybe I haven't followed that the most recent years, but let's say independent of where the regulation is, we have seen different projects in Germany where you've got, those aerial grids. I would maybe classify it as, a certain number of streets or just one street is totally grid independent. So they built their own grid. And so you've got your solar PV system on a, I don't know, commercial building, but that on that very small level supplies the households and making just smaller units that are safe, sustainable with heating and power. And it does work. If it works at the small level, at the end of the day, what you could do is you do just thousands of those aerial units, but that is kind of the revolution behind it. That's the distributed aspect. So I guess what I'm trying to say, it doesn't only have to be the optimization at the level of one household, but it could be a street, a neighborhood, or a smaller city. It could also be a big city. It does work. We have the technology. We just don't have the governmental support for it. And I also understand the reason why, because there have been investments made. It's really tearing down a system that has worked well over the last 50 and 60 years and helped not DZ4, but Germany, create wealth. And there's strong interest from big corporate companies and grid operators and all that kind of stuff. So I get all that. It's a very, very difficult decision. Like the decision to exit nuclear, like the decision to exit coal, next exiting from the existing big grid is, again, really a blow to different communities, taxpayers, where you really worry about, how can different things be supported also on the social level. So yes, it's complex, it's very difficult. And we don't live in an ideal world, but I think we share the same vision. And again, the technology is there today to do it on a very distributed and small level using smart grids and 100% renewable energies. It does work. We've seen enough of it.
I'm really curious about what type of jobs can smart grids create from your perspective. If we are talking about smart grids implementation in the nearest future, let's say there will be governmental support, there will be social resonance, there will be enough technology breakthroughs in, for example, IT security, stuff like that. Potential future scenario. What kind of jobs can smart grids create?
Well, I guess if we take if we define smart grid as something that can transport data.
Balancing supply and demand.
But it could be more data as well, right? I mean, we use power lines today also for different communications. So first of all, you've got the IT angle to it, in just making big data analysis and management available, I think. But then you've got at the second level, of course, it does support the installation of wind, solar, PV, and I don't know what, heat pumps, but not sure. But it does support really the deployment of those green technologies.
Yes.
So it would create Handwerker job, craftsmen, installer of solar PV systems, installer of heating pumps, installer of, I don't know what. It could facilitate additional services like the vision that we've worked with. I don't know if we shared that when you worked at DZ4, but I mean, at the end of the day, the data that we have from a household today through our online monitoring system.
I remember.
It's much more and much higher than the grid operators see, because the grid operators gets 15-minute signals. What was the consumption in a 15-minute corridor? We've got live data of the household on each of the three phases in case. So what you could do, I mean, the technology, again, I'm just saying the technology is there. We're not using it. But let's say we share a friend that isn't feeling so well. So he turns off the lights 3 times in a row in a time span of 5 seconds. And we define this as being an alarm signal. This could be detected through the technology that we deploy. So this could mean automatically, if that happens, there gets a call to that house saying, we noticed that you've turned on your light and turned it off 3 times in a row. That's our alarm signal. Are you feeling well? No, I'm not, or not responding, you send, an emergency vehicle to that house. That could be additional business models around healthcare, or I don't know, if you've got more sensors, more data, um, security aspects. I mean, really, it could be a facilitation of many local businesses around a house or around a shop or around a small commercial unit.
Totally.
Really, all. It could facilitate all.
Especially services, I guess, some kind of small companies round about household systems such as Internet of Things and all these monitoring systems. How well did I perform in the last month? How much energy I've consumed? How much energy I've saved into the grid? And all those things, I guess there's a big potential for it as well. Coming back, or let's say moving forward, combating climate change is a global international challenge. Do you think, based on Climate Action Program 2030, that Germany will achieve their target goals of CO2 reduction by 55% till 2030?
Oh, I don't know, to be honest. And actually, I focus on what I can achieve, and I focus on what DC4 can help, and the sentiment that I hear. And what I'm really positive about is the result of the last election. I
Yeah.
see the result of the election as something that, more specifically, young people have that on the agenda. The awareness increases around the climate change action, and I find that even more important. Maybe I need to think about that, because that's an absolute statement. But I really like seeing that. I really support that the awareness is there, and the motivation to change things, to change lifestyle. And it's becoming more of a movement, of a momentum behind it. And that makes me very positive that we will be able to achieve things as a society, bottom up, from people demanding it, from mindset on the average population in Germany, and certain, climate actions from our government, from companies. Will we be there in 2030? I don't know, but I see a sentiment change, and that's what I like seeing.
It's also a big social change. It's a big social change in minds as well. And that's actually the essential step into green future, from my perspective, because everything is done by people and for people at the end of the day.
Let's say there is a country that says we want to reduce our carbon emission by 80% over the next 20 years, and still builds coal-fired power plants and all that kind of stuff. Then I think I wouldn't feel so comfortable as in a society like in Germany, where we see the sentiment change. We see things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, totally. So we have 10 minutes more. I would like to come to our special rubric. The name is Blitz. The idea behind is very simple. I'll ask you questions and you answer them without any deep pondering or any kind of reflection, simply right away. There can be no true or false answers. And if you don't know, then you just say, don't know, absolutely fine. It's okay for you.
Go ahead.
What is the difference for you between living and existing?
Joy.
What are the 3 most valuable skills? It doesn't matter, soft skills or hard skills, in the renewable energy sector where you're working, where you have expertise for over 15 years and more?
Just in general, do what you love, do what you're good at. Specifically, if you're a job starter, the rest will come by itself. You just need to have a high level of motivation and identification with the job that you do. So I guess that's what I would leave it at.
Do you think discipline plays a role?
I think discipline comes automatically if you're fully committed, motivated, and like what you do. If it doesn't feel like something that you have to do, but that you like doing. Like, I don't know, maybe you sit down. I'm sometimes an Excel nerd. I could sit down for hours and build, calculate something, business model. I don't know. Yeah, and then I look at the watch and wow, 1 a.m. in the morning. I should be going to bed, but I haven't felt time running by. if we take, I don't know, someone and that is more interested in reading or doing marketing brochures, then
Yeah.
I guess enforcing that people to do that, that would be about discipline. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand the point. In my eyes, there are two crucial elements into succeeding in something. And the first, as you've mentioned, is motivation. It's absolutely important. This personal identification with something. Do what you love, push it, and the rest will come. But the second point is a discipline. There are bad days. Everyone has bad days. And sometimes you feel sick, you feel there is no out of your hobby or your job or your work or whatever. And that's where discipline comes into play from my perspective.
Okay, I would agree. I would call it differently, but
Okay.
maybe durability or something. I mean,
Okay.
you need to be able to get through your downs, right?
Exactly.
That's what you need.
We mean the same thing. Why are so many people afraid of making mistakes?
Because we live in Germany and we have a super difficult history. We come from a very hierarchical, top-down mentality. World War
Hmm.
II could only happen because of the mentality where the way the Germans were in the Kaiserreich, Obrigkeitshörigkeit. What the
Yeah.
person who tells you is true. You need to do it. It's correct, and you were not. We were not trained as a society to question, to find own solutions,
Hmm.
and that is very deep in the German mindset and changes. I see that with young people like you. I see that with people like me that try to, self-conviction and, do something. But that is really mindset in Germany. A mistake that could lead to your superior scolding you, as a kid, your parents scolding you. And I mean, I still go through the streets and a child dropping ice cream on the street and a mother saying, "Oh, you're so stupid. Now I need to clean it up yourself." Or what? I mean, can you feel with the kid? I mean, that has just lost an ice cream. It's disappointed. It didn't do that on purpose. But the German mindset is very difficult on that angle. It's very top down still. We need to change that.
I guess it's also a lot of things about supporting the change in the mindset. And as you've mentioned, with the child and the mother, we have the same story in Belarus, and it's still right now. And for me personally, since I moved to Germany in 2016, 2016, it was one of the most difficult things to change the mindset and to adapt. Literally difficult to hold both worlds inside of you and try to say, okay, hey, go away, go away. It's not something that you that you want to be. I think making mistakes is great, and it's better to try and fail than rather than not to try.
Take the pressure out. You just do your best.
Finally,
I mean, yeah, good. Like
that's what
lots of
that's
philosophy podcasts.
that's what I've noticed here. Why people are afraid of making mistakes. Okay, next question. Your one single favorite application on your phone, except messengers.
I could find that out, right? Um, I would say right now it's the ESPN Sports app.
Oh,
I don't play games, messengers, emails is like messaging. Um,
yeah.
maybe internet, but I'm really into, since I lived in the States, I'm into US sports. Right now, it's Super Bowl is coming up in 2 weeks. And I'm really excited about it. So I like reading US sports news, which may sound odd, but that's a frequently used app.
All right. And the last question. Imagine you can travel through space and time, come back to the very origin first days of Visit 4. One thing you would like to change.
That is,
There's definitely something. Maybe something
yeah.
small. Maybe it's just the logo, but still.
I think I would have changed my focus on I'm trying to make it so that the listeners can deal with it without going into specific details. But I think I've tried to build the company in a certain way and have, everyone has a time budget and where do you spend your energy and what do you focus on? I think I would have had a different focus in different phases of the company. At the end of the day, building we've touched upon that at the beginning. founding a company is a long journey, and
Mm-hmm.
many pieces need to come together in order for it to be successful. I'm not sure whether we're successful or not. We're still in business, but others define my father-in-law always said, you're not successful as long as you don't make profits, and we're still not making profits, and
Yeah.
we're growing. And there's always that ambiguity. Do you want to grow or do you want to make profits? And anyway, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, the development of the company, at times we were lucky, at sometimes we had bad luck, but some of the bad luck could have been, or miscues or things that could have done better. And I think the overlying issue here is where I spent my focus in growing the company. I think when I would do it another, which I won't, just too much, too much energy at different phases, I would have had different focus in developing the company. It would then be a different company, but would like to try different focus in different areas.
If I could ask, can you be a bit more certain what kind of areas or what? Just an example.
Let's say I really like the product that we built. I like relationships, like I said, and I really also like sometimes details. I think we've been very, very good in recruiting. I think we've got a great team with great people and good chemistry. But I think at points I have focused more on the business side, on less on the investor side.
Okay.
And that can be done differently. You can also focus more on your investors and make them happy and focus less on the business. And that is very high level of simplification. I thought, let's work on the cost, let's work on the product, much rather than the ones that finance that and that have also a right on different things. And I think that I could have done differently. Differently for certain, maybe I could have done it better also.
All right. Would you like to say something to the listeners? Maybe short Disit for promotion or whatever?
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I'd be curious if support Vlad. I think he's a great talent. I don't want to put a burden on you and too many weights on your shoulders, but I'm really excited to see where you end up in 20 years. I think you were a great member of our team and wish you all the best. And I would also invite the listeners to this podcast. I mean, drop me a line, connect me. If you support the cause, I'm always happy to talk, always happy to help. Don't expect me to answer in 1 or 2 minutes, but I usually do answer. And it's not because of disinterest. Sometimes I have a full mailbox.
My heart is melting right now. Okie dokie. Thank you for coming, Tobias. It was a pleasure to have such a wonderful conversation with you. I wish Disit4 and you personally all the best for our sustainable future. Take care and have a nice evening.
Cool.